Hello, and welcome back to Mammalian Anatomy at Keuka College. In this video, we're continuing our conversation on Chapter 12, the special senses. And here we're going to focus on the sense of smell, or what we call in physiology, olfaction. So in our last video about taste, we learned that taste and smell are both chemical senses, meaning that they use chemoreceptors or chemical receptors to bind to chemical compounds that are found in mucus or in saliva from food or odors. So in this video, we're going to focus on olfaction and olfactory receptors. Olfactory receptors are chemoreceptors located on sensory neurons in the nasal cavity, and they're responsible for binding to chemical compounds that are dissolved in mucus called odors. We have thousands of different types of olfactory receptors, and each of them are going to be able to bind to different compounds. And this is going to allow for us to have a wide range of smell that we can detect in our environment. Taste and smell actually work very closely together to provide what we perceive as flavors. So taste is one sensation, smell is another, but when we use them together, we can perceive flavors, and we can detect 10,000 different types of flavors. We know from personal experiences that taste and smell are closely related to each other. So have you ever been sick and had a really, really stuffy nose, and you try to eat like one of your favorite foods and you find that it doesn't taste quite right? That's because you're not able to use the information from your smell receptors to be able to detect a wider array of flavors in those foods. Another really good example of that is if you're sick and have a stuffy nose, if you take a bite of an apple, it'll taste more like a potato than that bright, crisp kind of flavor that we associate with that fruit. So in the next slides, what I'd like to do is go over the anatomy of the nose and look at the different olfactory receptors that are located there. And then we'll go into the physiology and the olfactory pathways of the olfactory system. So olfactory receptors are going to be located in the olfactory epithelium. The olfactory epithelium is going to be located in the superior part of the nasal cavity. So it's going to be on the roof of the nasal cavity, on the superior portions of the nasal septum. Remember, the nasal septum is a part of the nose that will actually separate the two nostrils. And the olfactory epithelium is also going to be on the superior nasal conchae, these curved bony structures that are at the roof of our nose. So in summary, the olfactory receptors are located in the olfactory epithelium that is going to be on the superior part of our nasal cavity. The olfactory epithelium is a specialized type of pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Remember, pseudostratified means that the cells look as though they are layered, but in fact, each cell will touch the basement membrane. So it is a single layer of cells that are staggered. Within the pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue, there are going to be three special types of cells: olfactory sensory neurons, supporting epithelial cells, and olfactory stem cells. What I'd like to do is go to the next slide where we can have a larger image of this, and so it'll be easier to see the cells. So we can see here, this is going to be the superior part of the nasal cavity, and we're just taking this kind of area and kind of zooming in and magnifying it. So just to orient ourselves, this is going to be the ethmoid bone that is going to be on the roof of the nasal cavity. And here we'll see the olfactory foramina that we saw when we were studying the skull. The structure up here is going to be the olfactory bulb. This is the first part of the olfactory nerve, or cranial nerve 1. And down here, what we're going to have is we're going to have the olfactory epithelium. The olfactory epithelium is going to have 3 cells. The first cell is going to be the olfactory sensory neuron. And this olfactory sensory neuron is going to be a bipolar neuron. It's going to have a cell body in the center, and from either end, we're going to have a dendrite and an axon extending away from it. Remember, bipolar cells are very rare in the body, and so this is going to be one special place in which they are located. Another region where they are located is going to be within the eye. These bipolar cells are specialized because they are going to have olfactory cilia at their base, and these olfactory cilia are going to contain the chemoreceptors, or the olfactory receptors that are going to detect different odors. Their axons will actually travel through the ethmoid bone into the olfactory bulb, and will synapse with different neurons within the olfactory bulb. We'll talk about that more later when we talk about the pathway for olfaction. We have supporting epithelial cells that will kind of surround the olfactory sensory neurons, and we will also have olfactory stem cells located here. I did want to talk a little bit about the olfactory glands. We do have excretory, not excretory. We do have, why am I spacing? Never mind. We do have olfactory glands that are going to produce mucus. This mucus is very important because this mucus will actually be responsible for dissolving the chemical compounds that are found in odors. And we need to be able to dissolve these compounds so they can come in contact with the olfactory cilia. Okay. So next, what I'd like to do is go through the physiology of smell, or olfaction. I'm going to give you a moment to be able to write this information down, and I'll pause, and then I will go on to the diagram again to show the physiology behind it. Okay. So how does olfaction work? So what will happen is that air will actually enter the nasal cavity, and this air will carry odors onto the olfactory epithelium. Within the olfactory epithelium, the odors will dissolve into mucus, and this mucus will carry those compounds onto the chemoreceptors that are found on the olfactory cilia. These chemoreceptors will convert that stimulus into an action potential, and that action potential will be carried through the bipolar cells, through the ethmoid bone, into the olfactory bulb, where it will meet with neurons that will process that information here, and then eventually send that information to the rest of the central nervous system. In the next slide, we'll look at the different olfactory pathways and talk about where that information is processed. Again, I'm going to go back to the image. So let me give you a moment to kind of write this information down, and we'll talk about this together on the diagram. So let's talk about the olfactory pathway. So what will happen is the bipolar cells, or the olfactory sensory neurons, will carry this information through the ethmoid bone and bring the information into the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb is the first part of the olfactory nerve, and the olfactory nerve is going to be a cranial nerve, and specifically it's cranial nerve 1. Within the olfactory bulb, what will happen is the sensory neurons will synapse with a special type of cell called mitral cells, and they will synapse in a complex structure called glomeruli. Here there's going to be a lot of processing that will occur even before the information is sent to the brain. So we're going to do a lot of neural integration located within the glomeruli. The mitral cells will then become stimulated, and it will carry information from the olfactory bulb down the olfactory tract, which is the continuation of the olfactory nerve, and it will send this information to the limbic system and directly to the primary olfactory cortex. Remember, the olfactory nerve does not necessarily have to send this information through the thalamus. It can be sent directly to these areas. So why the limbic system? The limbic system is going to be an area of the brain, or a collection of areas in the brain that work together to produce strong emotion and memory. So when this information is sent to the limbic system, it will lead to an emotional response to the smell that we are detecting, and it will also stimulate the formation and the retrieval of memories. So imagine going home and smelling your mom's cooking, or smelling like cookies in the oven, or whatever thing that you associate with being at home. That will bring certain emotions back and certain memories back when you detect that sensation. So for me, when I go home, my mama always makes kielbasa and rosu. That is kind of a food that we eat all the time. And so it brings back a lot of memories of my childhood. So it's always kind of nice to go home and eat a lot of the Polish food that I don't get to make very often when I live in Rochester. The other location where the information is going to be sent is going to be the primary olfactory cortex. The primary olfactory cortex will allow the sense to be processed, and it will lead to conscious awareness of the odor that we're detecting. So that is olfaction. We talked about the anatomy of the olfactory epithelium, which contains the olfactory sensory neurons, and we talked about the physiology of olfaction, or smell, and we talked about the different pathways and the regions of the brain that process smell. All right, have a wonderful day, and I hope you're good to yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.